Hi there, everybody. Mondion, Astral, Oracles. Practical announcements Sunday in a week live stream that will be the 12th of March 2023. The Actorians will be joining us. I plan, unless I get some surprise inspiration, I'm looking forward to communicating with those guys again. So please check in with my main man Umblam and the Actorian Council and your questions for that. Also, I have some other places where I'm active. You can find that in the show notes. And then thank you also for liking, sharing, and all those things, subscribing, but also your beautiful comments. New people have been leaving sweet comments, so I just wanted to thank you for that, and also, of course, the people I know who leave comments. I always read them, and I will respond to them at some point. So just know that I do treasure those, and thank you for them. Well, the reason that I don't always answer comments immediately is it's kind of forces me to orient myself on the horizontal axis, and that's essentially what I'm here to talk about today. Sexuality, like the great expression of the horizontal axis of life, right? Where we relate to each other interpersonally, socially, in a lot of ways, and. I'll be channeling the dragons later, but just I'll also look into this basic phenomenon. It's continuing this series of looking into some of these very basic human phenomena: eat, sleep, reproduce, right? Money, sex, dreams, those things, and of course it's interesting because sexuality it's a very universal force. It seems to be something that the universe and biology, at least in our system, is very keen on arranging things in this way. And it's a very helpful way of organizing a complex organic molecules, life into separate units, and then have it reproducing itself in that way, which is why it does that. It seems, right. So that's why DNA tends to do that in comparison to RNA, is my impression. So it's of course a universal force that just is from a non-personal perspective operating through anything. So the universe sort of separating itself in composite energies that it expresses in physical units, and that are attracted to each other to seek new units. And this is also what is sometimes known as dialectics. And you may be aware of that model that's often brought forward to explain that, the idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right? So the universe in its development structure, spirit, as Hegel called it, is moving from having one position to its opposite position, and then trying to unify those, and then from that synthesis, then generating that as a new thesis, right? So we are, in a sense, just a part of a biological program that's developing. And from the impersonal perspective, just as we don't mind breaking a few eggs to sustain ourselves through the day, the universe doesn't mind breaking up units, personalities, things, and kind of pushing them into these systems of contradiction, that we could think of sexuality as an arrangement of that, right? It's discrepancy. It's things that are separate but interconnected. And then that, of course, contrasts to, again, our very personal experience of sexuality, which is really the part where we are incredibly personal as human beings. And this is often why you will find that spiritual traditions kind of just shorthand you that, yeah, you should kind of stay away from that, especially esoteric transcendental traditions. Taoism, Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, things that are very like oriented in moving into, let's say, actualized reality and past the differences and troubles of this world. They don't really like sexuality in that way because it is um, karma, right? To stick in an Indian terminology, sex is just it's simply it's the clearest kind of karmic act that you can undertake. And I'm pretty sure that you found out either in your life, right, that if you are either very preoccupied with running around obtaining or getting sexual relationships in place, that really kind of informs your actions, your everyday in a lot of ways, that keeps you very preoccupied and engaged in the world, and very preoccupied with a sense of want, longing, and an idea of fulfillment out there. Then, of course, if you're having lots of sex, right, you'll find that it usually has a kind of strange depleting effect. So much as, for instance, in the golden mean, that's often prescribed, that's a Epicurean term, but it's also like this idea of the mean in Buddhism, the golden middle path, right? um, there is this idea of too much sensation kind of overloading us, and you'd find that being very engaged in sexuality seems to have this kind of draining effect that, for instance, overeating or over compulsions can have in other ways. And I'll sort of get to let's say its higher manifestations a little later, but just let's look into why it's so problematic to spirituality. So we have this very, very karmic thing, because of course what it aims to do is essentially to transpose your life energy into a new unit of life. So just the very fact that children arise from the sexual act is, of course, incredibly karmic, because it keeps the manifestation of action going. And the very fact that you will have children and be responsible for that will, of course, be something that will again continuously inform your actions, and in that way bind you into the constant arising and reactivity of needs, wants, desires, fulfillments, all these things that constitute karma, the wheel of time, that constitute what's called the world in the Gospel of John, for instance. Because in Christianity, of course, what corresponds to the karma concept is the central concept of sin, and sin is opposed to love. Um, so if we take love as the very idea of charity, empathy, compassion, um, and that's a good, I think it's a good definition. And Christianity is, in its most beautiful expression, of course, quite explicit in that idea that the relationship to the other, the love for the other, is essentially the same as the love for the divine. And that's why, like, the kingdom of heaven is accessed through that. We could call it divination of the horizontal axis, right? And so that the cross is, of course, the opening of the heart center in the middle of the vertical and the horizontal. So that idea, that opening to the other person, and taking that, loving the other as yourself, is the sublime divine act. And that is opposed to sin, which of course is then taking the other as object, right? So instead of it being a part of yourself, the universal subject, the universal soul, the other becomes object. And that's a type of enslavement. And turning people into objects, of course, for instance, lying to them is a thing that does that. But sexuality has a very clear tendency to do that, partially because it's connected to attachment, right? Attachment rises, emotion arises, wants arises. but also because it's connected to uh, competition, and thereby to possession. It's connected to the idea that, however high we manifest and align with universal love, as soon as there's kind of, two guys who want one girl, or vice versa, or however that's arranged, right, that there is an element of somebody being reduced to something that can be attained and had simply as an object, and that's reducing someone to a thing, and that is the absolute opposite of spirituality. So notice that, like this kind of beautiful, almost playful process that seems to take place as you become more aligned with your true self, where everything seems to become imbued with its own sense of vital integrity, I'd almost call it, and where you seem to approach these things. Can talk about food in another video, right? But these things such as eating, as sexuality, as everyday rituals, such as cleaning, for instance, with a new sense of significance, and reverence, and respect. And I have a hair in my eye. There it was. Um, and that is quite opposed to that idea of objectification, of feeling unfulfilled, of striving for attaining somebody. And then, of course, sexuality, as many have pointed out, but perhaps someone like Arthur Schopenhauer very clearly pointed out that sexuality kind of has this game of promising you a release that will then lead you into like further ones. And that is of course, like that sense of blind will, right? So it gives you the impression that, hey, if you attain this, you'll be happy, but of course, even if you get in the relationship, there will just be a new sets of challenges and experiences, because that's not static. And again, when we have that idea of the relationship, which is also something that I think our culture, and in many ways we like to tell ourselves that we can do the forever happy forever after, or do those subsections where we tell a very romantic part of life that isn't that doesn't correspond to real life, because what goes on, of course, in human relationships, and even more so in this age where we are so free to figure out ourselves and make new independent choices in our life, that is that we're then trying to negotiate and understand others, and that's of course an empathetic process, right? So it's the idea that you never just get stuck with a girlfriend. You get stuck with a human female who has like all kinds of experiences and preferences and ideas and wonderful ways of being, and perhaps slightly more difficult configurations that are hard to deal with, right? And all that, and that will of course come into play with that, all that stuff that you have, that you're bringing to the table. So it's again the idea that the attainment is never there. It's only simply a relation, an opportunity for more dynamism, for more growth, for new ways for the universe to expand itself. And that's, I think, why we can't necessarily just do that shorthand that you did in former times, where you said, okay, um, just try to stay away from that business, because that will kind of muddle your spiritual progress, because it's also for us to integrate and grow and develop. And we are, of course, also in that interesting position with what we call the sexual revolution. But the idea that we now have eliminated a lot of the factors that were actually very, very good arguments for kind of keeping down promiscuity as a social factor. So for instance, just, venereal diseases, like if you don't have anything to combat that with, it's probably a good idea you have somebody suddenly shame some people into to keeping it in their pants every Sunday, right? Like that's kind of sensible. And the same idea, in a society with limited resources, the idea that you kind of try to avoid just having random pregnancies and stuff is also makes sense, because population control is a huge factor. And all of these kind of moralities that we have built around that, and necessities, are being dismantled. So we are kind of free to, at least nominally, to try to explore ourselves physically and sexually, interpersonally, in new ways as humans and as a civilization. I really think that's very much the eon, the new age of Aquarius, and a way that's manifesting. And also through of course, now I'm speaking in binary terms, but like in these very, very interesting gender manifestations that are going on, especially that's come very much to the forefront in latter years, with the prevalence of transsexualism, and how to understand that, which is also a part of the interesting panoply of the way that human sexuality seems to be exploring itself, expressing itself, coming to terms with itself in new ways, and in the light that of it having kind of shed that light of morality. And of course, we work a lot with aliens here, and I think like the idea that the sublime intelligence, that purportedly underpin the creation of reality and everything, that they just living in one galaxy out of billions of galaxies, and once there's like 100 billion stars in this galaxy, right? So the idea that the creator of the all would be highly concerned with how you operate your genitals in the daily, I feel is kind of a very preposterous statement, right? Like that just can't be how the universe is arranged. And it does seem then how it is arranged is that sexuality has as many manifestations in us, or expressions of humanity, different manifestations, different layers of experience. So of course, without getting too graphic, right? Like, of course, sexuality can be related to a lot of incredibly horrible things, and it can also just be kind of a sort of kind of a crude thing, right? And then it can sort of elevate into these beautiful, is it called the Song of Solomon? I forget in English, those Old Testament erotic songs, for instance, and like those beautiful declarations of love, and which is a tradition that's then grown in Islam and in Christian poetry later, and like these ideas of the beloved, of the sort of almost romantic devotion to the divine, this sort of sweet dedication to something. And that's of course a very beautiful type of yoga, right? A spiritual practice of loving another person. And I think when we all of us, when we come across those, they often seem a little too rare, right? But those relationships where you really feel that these two people have sort of devoted themselves to that process, and understand that, that kind of it's interesting how that inspires a calm, a sympathy, a sort of homeliness in everyone that comes into contact with that couple. And in that way, there is really a sort of settling of those two energies. the feminine and the masculine within that balance, which is incredibly beautiful. And then, of course, sexuality in itself can also be incredibly beautiful and and rich, energetically rich. And there are, of course, systems such as Tantra, notably, which is devoted to the left hand path of God. Um, and it's this idea that it's through the immersion of the world, through working with energy as it becomes manifest. So rather than the transcendental, it's the immanent, it's the energy and the divine in the world that you try to release. I don't skew that way necessarily too much myself, or I do, I think, try to seek kind of a middle path. But I was never that inclined into sex magic. You can go into the latest live stream. It's called Windows to a Wider World, where he actually explained like how sex magic works and how you can do it, and it is a very, very powerful tool if you want to use it. But it also seems to me that it releases a whole lot of energy again into karmic flow. So just being conscious and aware of if that's something you want to do. And quite early, I think a few months into my Kundalini awakening, where um, this girl, my girlfriend for a while, and we had a sexual experience that was just like energetic orgasm that kind of arose out of the blue, and was very overwhelming for the both of us. But relating it to later energy experiences I can definitely tell that it was that completely overwhelming energy. And it is actually quite akin to, if you've ever had the displeasure of sticking your fingers in a light socket, or getting shocked somehow. It's quite actually quite akin to that intensity when it builds. So it is definitely something that's very powerful and workable. And with that long preliminary that I hope kind of framed you, or framed this whole process. I would love to consult with the dragons and our old friend Flip, and the ancient shapeshifting reptilians. And we're talking to dragons about human sexuality. Well, because you see, the ancient shapeshifting traditions, crocodilians, reptilians, they are shapeshifting masters, right? And that is Tantra. That's the energy of the world. That is Shakti, essentially. So it's this rich um, energy that's constantly transmuting. And the whole mythology about these lizards, these space lizards, is that they made the jump from another universe into ours exactly because they didn't want to do the right hand thing of unifying with source and transcending completely. And they were far more interested in operating these left hand energies in a new universe. So in that way, they should be able to tell us a lot about sexual polarity, how to use it, and yeah, how to approach it. So without further ado, much love to you out there. Greetings. I'm being informed by the individual that is bringing me forward to speak up, and to also address you in a frequency range that you may be able to understand in human terms. Regardless, I am Flip, the the ancient shape-shifting reptilians. And I come respectfully to inform you some of the powerful secrets of this phenomenon of attraction that plays out in the universe. Because indeed, these systems that have arisen on this planet, they are by no means unique to this planet. These are ways that complex life will begin to experiment. So see, what you also intuit is that there is a complexity to the mammalian system of gestation, of bringing things to pregnancy, and then also of lactation, of allowing energies to be transferred into a specific type of nourishing liquid, and to even have this process of lactation be something that's prioritized within one of your two sex genders. So this serves the process of the purpose of extending the energy accumulation within a human being. So what this one, the vessel, was commenting on before was this idea also that your energy is transferred into new life, new karmas, new actions, new events through the sexual act. Notice, therefore, that this drive towards this act begins late in your species compared to most other beings on this planet. This has to do with subtle energy accumulation. So this is a part of what you also intuit in this contradiction between the spiritual and the material, the vertical and the horizontal. It is you find that high consciousness, this type of understanding, curiosity, purity, that is so pronounced in human children, that this becomes compromised and obscured as soon as the sexual agenda enters the physical system and the human being. You begin to want, and you begin to project those wants onto other people. And so you end up in situations where you try to bend the world to your desires rather than have your desires accommodate themselves to the world. And so this is what you find, and this is what many of you have been finding for a long time, is that this immediate desire, though it remains as an energetic current, could even say a river that flows continuously through your incarnation. This desire is transformed then into impulses of appreciation, of dedication, of sweetness, gratitude, and pleasant sensation. So you find that there is a type of kind eroticism to the physical world. The stars, they twinkle at you. The hills take on the soft curvatures that inspire senses of comfort, ease, and joy. You find that the winds become soft whispers of comfort to your incarnation. So understand, human beings, that we are enamored with this creation in ways that we feel many species, you included, do not appreciate. We enjoy the physical universe, and we wish to remain with it, tend to it, explore it. And this is the tension that you often find, you being made of so composite elements. Have you made up your mind about whether or not you wish to remain and explore, be a part of? Or are you going elsewhere? Are you already moving off world, dear ones? Are you finished with this physical framework? Because if you are, then so be it. You can activate this in different ways. There is no obligation in doing either or. There is nothing excluding you from ascension, from moving into higher energies by being a sexual being. But you may find that sexuality is a type of very raw, powerful, potent energy. And those prudent among you understand that you should safeguard this energy. Share it only in spaces where it is honored. And treat it with great care and compassion. So, as has been explained to you by many species, but this energy becomes directed, loaded, informed by consciousness. And at your current stage of development, symbols is how you orchestrate and make consciousness flow. It's how you direct it through the void of energy. And notice how many symbols, how much information you are being provided concerning the nature, the deeper qualities of sexuality. And notice how this limits your sense of this energy within yourself. So you will again find that the secret to this universe and to creating the reality you want, even if this is a reality with the flow of a lot of sexual energy in it, sexual activity, you should cultivate this energy within yourself. Where is it seated? What blocks it? And how can you release it? By relating to your own physicality. This often has to do with relaxation on the physical level, acceptance, self-acceptance on the mental level, and connection to your eternal nature or configurations on the spiritual level. So again, understanding yourself as a lover, setting up the symbols that you want to inform yourself and creating these from the inside, rather than letting these low frequencies that limit and neuter the sexual energy, letting them intrude on you from the outside. We believe that you may already understand what we are saying here. What we are saying, and we do believe that people have blamed us for doing this. So shooting the messenger is something that you tend to do, you humans. What we are saying is that you are very, very easy to manipulate once you have gotten in to the game of seeking sexual satisfaction. That you will find that the energy itself is a raw energy that can be constantly concentrated, honed and circulated, both within your body, within your mental states, and within your interaction with life. There you will then again find that there is within this connection to the heart within you and the universal heart, there is an opening of the harmonic balance that you seek. And so you will find that for those of you who may have experienced imbalances in the idea of sexuality overflowing or becoming destructive in your life, you may find that you are guided to a type of more protective alignment of it. But you will also find for many of you who have retreated from the horizontal axis that you become drawn in to exactly this world, to this type of physical opening, to this type of confrontation of the opposite energy, then often manifest as a type of shadow energy, because it exactly is the thing that has been suppressed. So however more you awaken, you will find that the theme of sexuality will, like all basic themes that exist within the human framework, come to move through consciousness, to be understood, to be seen, to be fitted in, and to be accepted. Therefore, ask yourself, what symbol can you create? What symbol do you identify with? What force is it that directs the flow of your sexual energy, your energy of reproduction, your raw creative energy? Which channels are you putting up for it to flow? Where do you seek to change and alter the world by adding your energy to it? and letting it grow and become manifest. You are magicians, and we are guiding you in this sharing knowledge as it may be relevant for you. Reach out to us for insights and understanding. And therefore, dear human beings, I flip Trukar of the ancient shape-shifting reptilians. I bid you farewell. Power, honor, love. It's been a long time since I channeled him. I found it I found it interesting. Much love out there.